All right, gentlemen, welcome to your first class on effective team management. Obviously, this is for the basic non-commissioned officer course, phase 2, 411 Bravo, which is the infantryman. So if you're here, I'm assuming that you're here because you're interested in being a platoon sergeant. And if you're going to be a platoon sergeant, then not only do you have to understand how to make fire teams function with one another like you already are, but you have to be able to understand how to make multiple fire teams within a squad function together as a platoon. So we're going to talk a little bit about effective team management, and this is something that most of you should already be familiar with. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first thing we're going to look at is the word team. I feel like there's a lot of value in understanding the etymology of where things came from. So real quickly, the first is that in the Old English it meant a set of draft animals yoked together. And it was literally the idea of two oxen working together as a unit to accomplish a task. Obviously, if you had one that was slow or you had one that wanted to run faster than the other or go in opposite directions, then it caused all kinds of problems and they weren't actually able to complete their task. Also, it comes from the Proto-Germanic tamaz, which means bridled or governed. And this is more of the idea of you from a top-down perspective making that team work with one another. So it's the authoritarian perspective rather than the actual team itself. In the English, however, number one, it means a number of persons forming one of the sides in a game or a contest. Secondly, it means a number of persons associated in some joint action. In your case, it's going to be both. Obviously, your game or your contest is war, and the joint action is whatever mission it is that you've been assigned to accomplish. So let's start with the principles. How do we do effective team management? Number one, building teamwork requires hard work. Hard work is something you should already be familiar with if you wear that uniform. But it means that there are some things that you have to do. You can't just stand back and expect cohesion to develop. So you have a number of commitments that you have to make yourself. Number one is to self-care. I kind of learned this one the hard way when I was in drill sergeant school. We went on a road march at a time that no one should be doing a road march because it was the middle of the summer and we left at 7 in the morning, which, as you know, doesn't work out too well. So by the time we got to the end, my feet were so chewed up that I had to get sent to sick call against my will. When I got back, I decided I was going to go ahead and put my boots on anyway and go out on the op that we were doing. And my drill sergeant leader looked at me and said, no, you need to go sit down and put your tennis shoes back on, because even if you're able to accomplish one or two of these tasks along with your men, what are you going to do when you can't do any more? You have to be able to take care of yourself in order to be able to take care of anyone else. And it doesn't mean that you don't ever suck it up and drive on. It means that as a leader, you have to understand the difference. Second is availability. When your men need you, you need to be there, whether that's answering the phone, responding to a text message. You do obviously have to have some personal time, but in order for that team to trust you, in order to be able to help them work with one another, you have to be available to them. You can't just show up for work hours and disappear, or show up for work hours and sit in your office and not do anything with the members on your team. Third is accountability. Not only do you have to have personal accountability yourself to your own leadership and to your peers, but you have to be able to hold your men accountable because they need to know if what they're doing is right or wrong. And lastly is encouragement. It took me a long time to understand that you can't just tell people everything they're doing wrong and assume if they're doing it right that they already know that. You have to encourage them in the things that they're doing well as hold them accountable for the things that they're not. Take a look at this quote before we get into the next. It says, it's as simple as this. When people don't unload their opinions and feel like they've been listened to, they won't really get on board. And this is from one of the leadership gurus that focuses on specific dysfunctions to the teamwork. And it seems like a no-brainer, but you know as well as I do that we don't like to hear people complain. And in the military, we kind of tell you what your opinion is going to be. But if you want those men to respect you, then you need to listen to what they have to say, whether you like it or not. It doesn't mean that you allow them to be disrespectful, and it doesn't mean that you allow them to make these statements in forums that aren't appropriate, but it does mean that you at least hear them out on a stage that they should be making those statements just to find out what's actually going on in their mind. So the second principle is that it requires the establishment and maintenance of trust. You have to be vulnerable. Be vulnerable about your strengths. Be honest about them. If you're good at firing your rifle, then let the people know you're good at firing your rifle. If you're a PT stud, then get out there and make sure people know that you're a PT stud, because doing that is going to help them trust you when you come up to them and tell them to fix what they're doing wrong. If you can't hit the broadside of a barn with a rifle, A, you shouldn't be in the infantry because you're totally worthless to it. But B, you have no right to tell anybody to do anything else. You have to not only be the subject matter expert, but you have to be the expert of the things that you're expected to do in the military if you're going to be a leader. Second is weaknesses. If you're no good at something, Own up to the fact that you're terrible at it. Work on it. Show them that you have areas that you need to develop as well. Third is successes. What are you good at? What have you done well? What awards have you gotten? And not only you, but these things apply to your team members as well. They have to be able to be open and honest with one another in order to actually develop the team. I mean, you're going to spend enough time with each other that you're going to know what people do well and what they need help with, but there are going to be some areas, because you don't have eyes everywhere all the time, there are going to be some areas that they're going to have to work with one another to help develop the team, and competitions can be a great way to do this. Getting to know the history of the man to your left and your right is a great way to do this, and you're going to have enough time because you're going to spend the majority of your time with one another. And finally, be honest about your failures. If you've made mistakes, if you've screwed things up, if you've gotten your hands slapped, then be honest about that, because inevitably you're going to have soldiers that do the same thing. And they're going to need to be able to tell one another the things that they're not able to succeed at, and the things that they failed in the past, and these can be motivational and cohesion building. Thirdly is that it requires complete commitment of the leader. It requires modeled belief. It's not enough to just say that you believe in something. You actually have to walk out a lifestyle and actions that demonstrate that you actually believe in it. You need to demonstrate that you believe in the purpose of the military, in the purpose of your job, of your function, of being a soldier in 11 Bravo. You need to understand the objectives and believe in the objectives that you've been given. It doesn't mean that you have to necessarily agree with everything, but even if you're going to disagree with it, you have to know where to disagree with it. Wait till you get around your other E6 buddies and tell them about how much you hate this thing that you're having to do, because chances are so do they. That's just part of being in the military. But you surely don't demonstrate that to your soldiers. And granted, they're probably going to complain back and forth with one another, and that's just the way it is. But they need to know when they look at you that you believe in it, because that's going to help them believe in it, even if they're struggling. Thirdly is you have to believe that there's an ability to succeed. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You have to believe that if you're being sent out to do something, that there's a possibility, that there's a likelihood that you're going to be successful in it. Because if you don't model the belief that you can be successful, then your team is never going to work together, and they're surely not going to want to follow you. And lastly, you need to believe in your team members. They need to know that you believe that they're capable of things. They need to know that you have their back in things, and you need to go to bat for them. And it doesn't mean that you don't scuff them up behind closed doors, but it means that in the presence of your fellow team members and in the presence of everyone else, you're praising these people unless you have to make an example for some reason. Now this slide right here seems like it's a little bit humorous, kind of a joke. It says teamwork because bullets can only go through so many bodies. And we see them stacked there, obviously, behind that car. And it is a little humorous, but there's a truth to it. There's a reason that in the military we don't ever engage outside of Spec Ops. We don't ever engage in an operation that we don't have 3-to-1 odds in. When you go into a building and you do a clearing, you know that there's a chance that not everybody's going to make it out, but you go in there with the number of people that you do so that you have enough people to accomplish the mission. Guys, we all know that being infantry means we're expendable. Being a soldier means that we're expendable. Our actual identity as a person doesn't matter near as much as the accomplishment of the mission that we're given. In order for your team to work with one another, and in order for you to manage the way that that team is working, you need to understand this principle. And the principle is that we are a unit, and we are designed to function as a unit. And we work together with one another because we understand that if we're not functioning as a unit, but we're a set of individuals out there, we're never going to accomplish our mission. We stack the number of people, we stack the odds, we have better weaponry, and we're the most successful organization in the world when it comes to accomplishing our tasks as soldiers. So you need to understand, if you want your team to work effectively, if you want to be able to manage it effectively, you have to apply these principles, you have to believe in the things that you're doing, and you have to step up and take control in that manner, because if you can't do it as a squad leader, you're never going to do it as a platoon sergeant. And all you're doing is multiplying the number of people that you're going to get killed because you don't know how to make a team. Gentlemen, I hope you let that sink in a little bit. Obviously, we have a lot more to go through as this course progresses, but I want you to grab a hold of these principles and start to apply them as you're given leadership opportunities within this course, because if you can't apply them here, you're never going to apply them in real life. Thank you.